It was the morning of December 23rd, 2025. In Europe, a cheese exporter woke up to a terrible surprise. Their delicious products, known and loved in many homes, were suddenly 42.7% more expensive in their biggest market. This huge price jump happened in just one night. It was not just a small problem, it was a financial catastrophe for the business. This sudden change ignited a trade war. It was a new kind of war, fought in an unexpected place, the supermarket dairy aisle. The core of this conflict was China's shocking decision. They put high tariffs, or special taxes, on dairy products coming from the European Union. These new tariffs made milk, high-fat cream, and various cheeses much more costly to sell in China. This was more than just a business headline. This battle would affect almost everyone. It would change things for farmers milking cows in Ireland. It would also change things for families choosing food on the shelves in Shanghai. China announced that it believed the European Union was using unfair subsidies to help its dairy farmers. This was a complicated accusation, and we will explain what these subsidies are and why they are important in a later chapter. But the immediate question for many was clear. What exactly did China announce to the world that morning, and why was the specific number of 42.7% so terrifying for some of Europe's largest and most famous dairy brands? 2. The new rules. The government in Beijing made an important official announcement. New rules for trade would begin, changing the cost of many European dairy products. These new import taxes, known as tariffs, would range from 21.9% to a very high 42.7%. This sudden change was set to start on December 23, 2025. These numbers meant that some products would become much more expensive overnight. The new tariffs would affect specific dairy items coming from the European Union. These included fresh milk, cream, especially high-fat cream, and many types of cheese. Blue cheese was also clearly listed as one of the targeted products. China's Ministry of Commerce said its first findings showed that the European Union and its member countries had given money to their dairy companies. They claimed these payments had caused damage to China's own dairy industry. These duties are called provisional tariffs. This is a special legal tool. It means China can put these new costs in place now without waiting. This allows them to collect the tariffs while their full investigation into Europe's dairy support continues. This shows the quiet but strong power of a government document. Such official rules can quickly change how an entire business sector works. This entire process is part of an anti-subsidy investigation. In simple terms, China is examining if Europe's help to its dairy farmers gives them an unfair benefit. China believes this unfair help hurts its local dairy producers. We will learn more about the hidden rules of this economic warfare later on. However, these new tariffs are not the same for every company. Some European companies will face a lower new cost, like a light tap. But for others, the tariff is extremely high, almost like a knockout blow. This big difference will hit some businesses much harder than others. So, who are the biggest losers in this new trade game? Big companies, big problems. The new tariffs from China did not affect all European companies in the same way. Some big businesses got a much harder hit than others, causing immediate worries across the dairy industry. One of the most affected was Friesland Campina, a large dairy company from the Netherlands. Its products now faced the maximum tariff of 42.7%. This meant that every kilogram of their cheese or liter of milk would become almost half again as expensive in China. Such a massive price jump would make it very difficult, almost impossible, for them to sell their goods competitively there. It was a devastating blow to their established business in this important market. Another major player, Arla Foods from Denmark, also faced a significant challenge. Their tariff rate was around 29%. This was still a very high number, making their products much pricier for Chinese customers and much harder to compete with local brands or dairy from other countries. The market share they had built over years was now at risk. However, Italy's Sterile Garda Alimenti received a notably lower tariff at 21.9%. While this rate still made their products more expensive for importers and consumers, it was not as extreme as the rate for Friesland Campina. Their impact, while serious, might be more manageable. This big difference in tariffs created many questions. Why did China choose such different numbers for different companies? Was it a clear punishment for some specific actions or alleged subsidies? Or perhaps a warning to certain countries or businesses that China wanted to influence? The varied rates added a layer of mystery to China's move, making businesses wonder about the true intention behind these economic penalties. For these European giants, the tariffs brought immediate and severe problems. Their business operations in China would suffer greatly. Products that were once popular and reliable suddenly became too expensive for many buyers and distributors. This could mean huge financial losses, canceled orders, and a complete change in how they could operate in the lucrative Chinese market. Many years of building customer trust and supply chains were now under threat. This sudden focus on dairy seemed to come without much warning. It made many people wonder if the fight was truly about cheese and milk, or if it was a much larger battle. Was this a strategic move? A way for China to respond to a completely different argument with the European Union? The answer to that question lay beyond the supermarket shelves, hinting at bigger geopolitical games. Chapter 4. More than just milk. Chapter 4 looks beyond just milk and cheese. This dispute over dairy products is part of a much bigger fight between the European Union and China. It is not just about farms and food. It is about power and trade rules between big economies. This battle has moved from car factories to supermarket aisles. Before these dairy tariffs, the EU had already taken its own steps. the EU had acted against Chinese electric vehicles. They claimed China was giving unfair financial help, called subsidies, to its car companies. This help made Chinese electric cars cheaper to sell in Europe. Now, many observers believe China's new dairy tariffs are a direct response. It is a classic tit-for-tat move, where one side takes action and the other side quickly hits back. This shows how trade conflicts in one area can quickly spill over into others, even those far apart. Countries often choose food items as targets in these trade disagreements. Why do they pick products like milk, pork, or even brandy? There are a few reasons. Farmers are very important people in many countries. They have a strong voice. Also, food is a big part of a nation's identity and culture. Hurting a country's food exports can cause a quick and strong reaction from its people and government. Food products are also often perishable, meaning they can spoil fast. This creates urgency and bigger problems for farmers if they cannot sell their goods. These factors make food a powerful tool in trade wars. But there is another important part of this story, one that makes China's claims more complex. Many reports show that China's own dairy industry was already facing big problems. This was happening long before the EU dairy tariffs were even thought of. For a while, Chinese farms had produced too much milk. There was a significant oversupply of raw milk. This extra milk caused prices to drop sharply, making it very hard for Chinese dairy farmers to earn enough money. Consumer demand for dairy products in China was also not growing as expected. These internal issues meant that China's dairy sector was already struggling from within, facing its own difficulties. So, if China's own dairy farmers were already struggling with too much milk, low prices, and weak demand, can they truly blame Europe's imported products for all their financial troubles? Or is the claim that EU subsidies caused damage just a convenient excuse for actions that have other, wider reasons? 5. China's own problems. China's dairy market was facing many problems even before new tariffs on European goods. Reports showed that China had its own troubles with milk. There was too much raw milk, more than people wanted to buy. This created a big oversupply across the country. Companies and farmers expected this problem to continue into 2025. This meant that the amount of milk available was much higher than the demand from consumers. Many in the industry saw this as a serious issue for the future of their farms and businesses. Because there was so much milk, prices for raw milk started to fall. Farmers could not sell their milk for a good price, which made it hard for them to earn money. At the same time, people in China were buying less dairy. This weakening demand added to the problem of oversupply. These issues were not caused by European imports alone. Instead, they came from inside China's own dairy industry, showing its struggles and weaknesses. These internal pressures caused great strain on local producers and the entire supply chain. These internal problems paint a different picture. China's government said that EU subsidies had damaged its dairy industry. But the facts show that China's dairy sector was already in trouble. It was struggling with its own issues of too much supply, low prices, and less demand. This makes China's reason for the new tariffs seem less clear. If the local industry was already suffering from its own failures, how much blame can truly be put on Europe? The situation suggests that other factors are at play. It looked like China's industry was having difficulties on its own, not just because of imports. This situation raises important questions about the real cause of the problems. The official story from China pointed to Europe, but the truth on the ground showed different challenges. This difference makes it hard to accept China's claims without asking more. The underlying issues were complex, showing a struggle within the sector. With these many domestic problems, it becomes difficult to understand how China can legally say that EU products caused the damage. There are clear international rules for when a country can put tariffs on another. But if China's own problems were so big, can it really follow these rules to justify its actions to the rest of the world? 6. How a trade war works. When countries like China or the EU think another country is selling products too cheaply, they can start a special study. This study is called an anti-subsidy investigation. It helps them decide if new taxes or tariffs are fair to add to those products. To make this decision, officials ask 3 important questions. The first question is, was there a subsidy? A subsidy is when a government gives special help to its own companies. This help can be money, cheap loans, or other ways to make products cost less to produce. For example, if a government helps dairy farmers buy cheaper feed, that is a subsidy. The second question is, did this subsidy unfairly benefit the exported product? Investigators look at whether the special help made the products much cheaper for export. They want to know if it gave companies an unfair advantage when selling to other countries. The third and often most difficult question is, did it cause injury to the domestic industry? This means, did the cheaper imported products actually hurt the local companies in the country buying them? For China, this means proving that EU dairy subsidies directly damaged China's own dairy farms and businesses. This part is very hard to prove. Why? Because, as we saw in the last chapter, China's own dairy market already had big problems. There was too much milk, prices were falling, and people were buying less. So it's hard to say if any damage came from European subsidies or from China's own issues. These 3 questions are the key steps in deciding if tariffs are legal in a trade war. With these rules now clear, the next big question is ready for an answer. How did the EU officially respond when faced with these accusations? Chapter 7. 2 sides of the story. The disagreement between Europe and China grew very clear. Europe quickly spoke out against China's new taxes on dairy products. Olaf Gill, a spokesperson for the European Commission, stated that these measures were unjustified. He added that they were not based on sound grounds. Europe believed China's reasons for these high tariffs on milk,
cream and cheese were weak and unfair, posing a serious problem for their farmers.
China, however, maintained a firm public stance. Its Ministry of Commerce announced that its early investigation had found clear evidence. China said that government support from the EU had unfairly helped European dairy products. These subsidized products, China claimed, had then damaged China's own dairy industry. For China, these new duties were a necessary legal step to protect its local farmers and ensure fair trade. This situation became a direct conflict of opinions. Each side insisted their actions were right, but they disagreed deeply on the facts. Europe questioned the truth and fairness of China's claims, saying the case lacked good evidence. China, on the other hand, pointed to its legal process, stating it followed international trade rules carefully. This battle was not just about tariffs, it was about who was legitimate and who was legal. For many people, this was not just a fight between distant governments, it was about their daily lives. In Europe, dairy farmers faced great uncertainty. Their businesses rely heavily on selling products to large markets like China. With these tariffs, their livelihoods were now at risk. They did not know if they could continue selling their cheese and milk, causing significant worry. In China, consumers also felt the coming changes. They might find fewer kinds of imported cheeses or cream from Europe in their local shops. Some popular European brands could become much more expensive or even disappear. While Chinese dairy farmers hoped these tariffs would help them, their industry still faced its own challenges, such as too much raw milk already being produced in China. With both sides holding on to their different stories, the new tariffs were now active from December 23, 2025. Yet the anti-subsidy investigation was far from over. This left a big question. Was there any real path to resolve this growing trade conflict, or was this just the beginning of a much larger economic struggle that would reshape global markets for years to come? 8. What comes next? This last chapter brings together everything we have learned. The situation with China's tariffs on EU dairy is very complex. It is about big country politics, which we call geopolitics. It is also about the money and business inside China, their domestic economics, and it involves the international rules of trade law. On the surface, China says it is using legal steps to fix unfair trade. They claim EU subsidies hurt their own farmers. But many see this action as a careful, strong move in a bigger fight between the EU and China. This fight is made even harder because China's own dairy industry had problems before these tariffs. Their farmers had too much milk, and prices were low. So the reason for the tariffs might not be just about EU subsidies. It could also be about China's own troubles at home. So, what will happen next for milk, cheese, and other dairy products? There are three main ways this story could go. First, the EU and China could choose to talk and make peace. This is called a negotiated de-escalation. They could agree on new rules or find a middle ground to reduce the tariffs. This would mean that governments work together to solve the problem, avoiding a long fight. Second, the argument could become a full legal battle. The EU might take China to the World Trade Organization, or WTO. The WTO helps countries solve trade problems. This process is very long and needs a lot of evidence. It would be a big legal challenge for both sides. Third, the market might just change on its own. Companies that buy and sell dairy might find new suppliers from other countries, not just the EU. Or EU companies might look for new customers outside of China. This would mean that the paths products take from farms to shops, called supply chains, would change forever. This situation shows us something important. A dispute that starts with big industrial things, like electric cars, can quickly affect everyday food items like milk. It proves that what happens in global politics is now something we see on our shopping lists every week. These big decisions touch everyone, from farmers to families buying food. What do you think? Do you believe it is fair for countries to use food products as a tool in a trade war? Or should food be kept out of these kinds of fights?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.